Good day everyone, this is Nemesis, and in today's video we are going to talk about the top 10 things that I believe should be implemented in Guild Wars 2 in the coming year. I took the liberty of making a list over the last 2 months, and I arranged them from the least important to the most important and fundamental thing that should really fix a lot of the issues that the game is facing currently. So let's begin. The first thing I wanted to implement, let's call it number 10, would be actually related to something that ArenaNet said in the beginning. They said that they try their best to make the game in such a way that you don't really need to look at an interface. Every piece of information that you need is actually in the game. You don't need the 100 add-ons, you don't need any auxiliary, how do you say that? Any auxiliary third-party programs to play the game. And then I found something like this. I searched for something like this because it's useful. You can make a better version of this that you can include inside the game, sort of like an event planner, so you are constantly aware of where all the events are in the map, and you can plan your events, maybe set an alarm clock, something like that. It will improve the game from a quality of life perspective, because since the game doesn't have a subscription fee, it draws its funds from quality of life improvements via the item shop. So this can be included in the item shop, so you can buy it for gems, and of course there should be an alternative way of getting for people who don't wish to invest, so the game doesn't transform into a pay to win. So it should be obtainable via guild tokens from guild missions, or some quests or bosses or something like that, and even from the Black Lion chests. Okay, the second thing, we know that the game draws its funds from the item shop, and since this game is still not a pay to win game, most of the things you can buy in the item shop, if not all of the things that you can buy in the item shop, are mostly aesthetics or pets or something that you can roleplay with, something that will improve your gaming experience without giving you any real advantage over other players. So we have a lot of pets. Okay, I don't have a lot of pets, but you can have a lot of pets. The only problem is that these pets are in the bank. They have their special slots in the bank. And there are two problems with that. First, whenever you want to deposit all collectibles, the pets are gone instantly, so you have to deposit them in special invisible bags, but that's not really a problem. The real problem is that they take a lot of your slots. So if you want to get into that and play with pets and showcase your pets and stuff like that, if you're a collector, if you want to roleplay, if you want to enjoy all aspects of the game, including this one, the fact that you have to choose how many of them you carry with you, because you are not really encouraged to have all of them at you at one point, because then you're not going to be able to hold many other items because they're going to fill your inventory. So my suggestion for this is actually quite simple, and it is already implemented in most other MMOs. So I actually got the idea from the finishers. In the past you didn't have the finishers over here, now they place them over here, and regarding finishers maybe they should have a preview functions as well. But back to the issue at hand, I believe that the pets should have their own place, like under finisher or above finisher, doesn't really matter, with a small preview, and with this you can actually have access to all your pets at any time you want to play, and it actually encourages the playstyle that ArenaNet has set upon. They started on the path of getting funds through skins, pets and other quality of life improvements, but they don't actually facilitate the usage of pets. So I believe that if they move the pets into the hero panel and also give them a preview, a lot more people would be inclined to using pets. And also in the same window should be most of the transformation items, charged potion, one potion, cold potion or whatever, to further improve the role-playing aspect, the role-playing experience, which a lot of people would be getting into whenever you're waiting for one more player to do a dungeon, or you're about to start guild missions and a lot of stuff like that. It encourages a lot of diversity that this game has to offer, even in the roleplay aspect of it. And the roleplay aspect of it, the skins, the pets, the everything, is what is fueling this game with money. Okay, moving on, I think this is number 8. It's actually still related to skins. We have a lot of skins, we have a lot of armor sets, we have a lot of everything, and new skins keep coming and coming and coming. The problem is, sooner or later you will run out of places to put the skins if you want to keep all of them. It's only a matter of time, like maybe in a few months, maybe in a year, you're going to run out of places to put your skins, and maybe you don't want to fill all your inventory slots and make alt characters just to put your skins there and you look at it in the inventory. So the solution to this is actually something that will improve the game on a different front. So we have housing, but you don't really do too much in the house except mine some candy corn and some other materials. You walk around the house a little bit. Maybe you should get a target dummy, a practice dummy to test your DPS. Maybe you should have like a damage meter in the housing only. Doesn't really matter. What I want to include in the house is an armory. An armory. Maybe make it like a recipe on the trading post that you can buy with gems, and of course obtain it via guild missions or any other way, so people that don't want to pay for it have an alternative way of obtaining it. So basically a recipe that you can craft via all the professions, and you can build your very own armory somewhere in your house, and you can put your favorite skins on the armor. Of course they should have different sizes, different genres, a lot of minor details, but the thing is, if you want to keep most of your skins in a place that you can always get them, you can place them on your armory. This will also make the housing a more personal experience, and at the same time the house is not just a place where you go and mine or some useless place. It will actually hold some value to the player. So that's about it with the housing and skins and stuff like that. Moving on to runes. A lot of players, including myself, as you can see, have a lot of different sets for a lot of different situations in the game. A berserker set, a hybrid set, a conditionmancer set, condition for PvE, condition for wall v wall, different type of sets. Sometimes you fill those sets with runes that are quite expensive, and if you want to change, if you want to go like from PvE conditionmancer into wall v wall conditionmancer, you don't always want to spend another 20 gold on runes just to stay in wall v wall, let's say for 1 or 2 days, and then you come back to PvE and you have to spend a lot of money on other runes and so on. So what I propose, you see, we can put runes or orbs or whatever, but runes are generally more expensive. So we already have the +1 system in the game with agony resistance. You take 2 +1s and you make a +2, and you take 2 +2s and you make a +3, and so on. The people are already familiar with the +1 system. How about we make some +1ing for runes as well? And if a certain rune reaches, let's say, +5 or +10 or whatever, it becomes a permanent rune that you can put in your gear and it never expires. So people can work towards obtaining permanent runes on the runes that they commonly use, so they don't have to farm like 5 different berserker sets just to have their favorite runes in each one of them, because it takes a lot of inventory space, and that's never something that you want players to go through. A lot of players have to decide between, okay, do I leave more room for farming, or do I carry all my sets with me, do I carry all my skins with me? It's not the most pleasant gameplay, that's what I'm trying to say. Moving on, another thing that I wrote down here, living story modification, higher purpose, replayability, by bringing back parts of it with modifications. I actually talked about this in great detail in a different video when I reviewed the living story. I'm going to link that in an annotation, and I'm not going to talk about this now because it's going to take like 20 minutes and I want to make this short. Okay, moving on. Yeah, structured PvP leagues and seasons. Basically, at the moment, all you fight for is for a spot on the leaderboards, which is actually an external thing, which is on the official forums under community leaderboard. It doesn't have like milestones, and it's not fluent in progression because of that milestone. The majority of the really successful esports, look at League of Legends for example, it has leagues. So you know, like, I'm a silver player, I'm a diamond player, I'm a bronze player, I'm a wood league player, I'm some sort of player, and whenever I advance another league, you're like, oh my god. And of course you should also have seasons with a season reset and a little bit improved method of calculating the statistics for advancing. And also maybe look at the current way in which League of Legends handles leagues. Try to not create a lot of ranked anxiety. Like they said, it's a really good implementation. Once you advance a league, you can never go back, so you're at that milestone. You can lose a lot of points, you're back down to the bottom of the league, but you can never truly go down from a league to get demoted. So this will encourage PvP. It will set like a certain milestone, so people will have something to work towards. At the same time, have the safety that once you cross the border, you're safe. No one will ever take that spot away from you until the new season, which should be like every year or every 6 months, or you guys decide. Another thing that I thought about was they are actually implementing this as well. They are going to be implementing legendaries for PvP, and I believe that they should be easier obtainable for players that are really high ranked in certain leagues, let's say. Because then, besides the fact that you will have a name somewhere in some league and everyone can see the leagues and stuff like that, you will also have an easier access to having legendaries in PvP. So the people that enjoy the PvP aspect of the game, that mostly want to do PvP, they can now also enjoy the legendaries, which is another part of the game which are not present in PvP at the moment, and it is a shame. Okay, moving on, this should be number 3. Infinite or a monthly commodity, build changer and saving process. You have a really complex build system. As you can see, you have 70 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trait lines. So there is a lot of depth to this. You can have, even on the same type of build, you can have different variations of it based on where you go, like in PvP, World v World, or PvE. For power build, for condition build, for tanking, for everything, it differs. If you're fighting mobs, you're not going to use the same build to fight players and mobs, since mobs are going to fight much differently than players. Of course, they're not intuitive, they don't counter CC, they don't prepare for a fight, they don't really run away and come back at an opportune moment. So definitely different build. So basically all that I have to say here is actually more or less common knowledge. A lot of games actually has this already. It's called dual spec. Some of you are familiar with this term. You can have one build and another build saved as a preset, and you can switch in between them. Okay, Guild Wars 2 maybe would want to take it another step further, and around somewhere around here could have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different build variations. This will actually allow players to use build diversity, a lot of different builds for different occasions, without suffering the discomfort of having to go to an NPC, change your traits. It's quite an inconvenience for no reason at all, especially for players that have been playing for a long while. It's fun sometimes in the beginning to remember how you place the traits and place them again and stuff like that, but after a while it just gets old. You want to do click and change a build. I talked a lot about build diversity, and a lot of people will say there's really no need for build diversity, we only have the Zerker meta. I have a solution for that, and I believe a lot of people are going to be pleased about it, including the people that are in the Zerker meta. I'm not sure, but I thought about it extensively, and we'll get to that in a few seconds. But first we reached number 2. The last 2 suggestions are a little bit more complex, that's why I try to compress the rest of them as much as possible, so I have a lot of room to talk about these 2. I even remade the last part of the video with these 2 suggestions, just so it comes out the right way. I actually made this suggestion before in the past, and I haven't forgotten it, and I actually improved it a little bit, so it will have value when we reach number 1. It's going to get really interesting now. So this game has the best build system I have ever seen, and in my opinion it's the best thing about this game. It's not the living story, it's not the story mode of the game. We all know Zaitan wasn't exactly what we expected. It's not the fact that the game is extremely balanced or an esport. It's not the voice acting, it's the build system. So in a game with such a build system that has the potential to be so much more than previous games that had the limitation of the Holy Trinity system, I believe that it requires more PvE diversity in the form of mob diversity. So in my opinion, it's not wise to have mobs that function within the Holy Trinity on a game that wants to be more than what the Holy Trinity could offer. So with that being said, my suggestion could be quite simply put as mob classes. Most monsters in this game are basically kill the mob. And we have some mobs that move faster, some hit a bit harder, we have some channelers, some summoners, some buffers, some CCers, what else? Some debuffers, some monsters that apply condition damage, and that's about it. This kind of raises a few problems. The most frequent one of all would be this game doesn't have a dedicated healer, and until you can heal a monster to death, there's no reason to play a healer. And there are a lot of other similar small variations to this problem that I won't get into. I'm just going to give you the solution, and you guys can see for yourself how this applies. So, let me give you guys some examples of some mob classes that I thought about. So, let's say a mob class, we can call them the Immortals or whatever. Lore-wise, they could be ghosts, ethereal, demons, whatever. Special ability is that they cannot be killed, and they expire after a set interval. Under other abilities, they can have one or more at the same time, depending on the location. If the mobs will be placed in a dungeon, open world, or an event, or whatever. Let's say they are really fast, because what's the point of having invulnerable mobs if you can just run away from them? And on that note, we can put homing attacks, a containment field, basically a huge field that you cannot get out of and you have to like run around like hamsters, or confront them through other means. Teleportation attack, heavy attack, and each successful hit makes them expire actually faster. AoE condition attack, cleansing the condition would make them expire faster. So you can see where I'm going with this. They would be highly effective against pure DPSers, and they can be heavily countered by tanks or healers or cleansers, whatever is made to be more survivable. So the problem that you cannot heal a monster to death would no longer be that sort of problematic if you think about it. Another mob class that I thought about would be Zergers. Lore-wise, you can have small creatures, demons, crawly things, whatever. The special ability would be a buff. They do increase damage when hitting the same target, so it's actually getting zerged. That's the big problem. Under other abilities, they can be fast, borrow, jump attack, stealth, or whatever. They would be effective versus all builds and playstyle, and they can be countered by debuffers like boon removals, chilling, and heavy AoE. Another idea would be, let's say, controllers. Lore-wise, they can be demons, ghosts, or asura, or whatever. Ghosts, you can do possession, or with demons mind control. You know, just another opportunity to include something that has meaning lore-wise, and it's really practical as a gameplay implementation. Under special ability, perma mind control players every set interval, 1 or 2 players every whatever number of seconds. Other abilities would be blink, AoE knockback, AoE knockdown. So they would be highly effective versus all build types and all metas. They can be heavily countered by stealth attacks. Since they will have really low HP, you might do AoE party stealth attack, because in this game stealth is mostly used to escape something or to skip monsters. Most of the time skipping is not intended, it's more of a permitted. It's like, okay, you've seen the dungeon so many times, feel free to skip if you got bored doing the same trash mobs over and over again. A coordinated stealth attack could be the difference between having a party not wipe but have to restart from the checkpoint, because you don't actually die, you just become under the control of an NPC, which brings another twist to the fact that you can lose in more ways than one, you don't have to die every single time. And it brings to light the importance of stealth in the game. Another class, summoners. Lore-wise, anything really, except pirates or whatever, I don't know. Special ability, perma protection, plus summon minions every set interval. Other abilities, in my opinion, a summoner class should have abilities related to their minions. They empower their minions, they prey on the archetype of the summoner. So minions are invulnerable to direct damage and take extra damage from conditions. As you can see, this could put condition builds on the map without actually modifying the build system, because every time you do some modifications into the build system, it influences PvP, and that's a really big problem. So you basically bring the PvE closer to the build system so that you can have an easier time balancing PvP without worrying about all of these things. So minions can be CC, take extra damage from fire, minions take extra damage from direct attacks, and have insane regeneration. Low HP and insane regeneration, think about it. People that enjoy playing power type builds like to see big numbers on screen. So some people really enjoy to do a coordinated burst, and this type of monsters really offers them the chance to really coordinately burst. And if you don't burst with coordination, it doesn't matter that you have a really big number on screen, the monster is simply going to regenerate past your damage. So they are effective versus all, and they're countered by, depends on the situation, what kind of minions will the summoners summon. Moving on, we have the mob class Stalker. Lore wise they can be draconic, undead, demon, whatever. Special ability would be the stock debuff. You have a debuff that has a range of 25,000 or 35,000 or whatever, doesn't really matter. The point is, as soon as you get within the set interval range of the monsters, you get the debuff on yourself, and it says something like you are being stalked. The more you move with this debuff on you, the stronger the monster that is stalking you will become. So eventually it's going to catch up to you at certain checkpoints or after a set interval of times, so you don't have the problem of having overpowering monsters run around after players, which is kind of a bit too much. Under other abilities, you can make them hide in a mob pack, and you have to kill a small mob pack, nothing too fancy. You kill them really quick, and after they die, the stalker appears. You can also make them have stealth, have a jump attack, a borrowed attack, doesn't really matter. The point is, these kind of monsters are meant to counter high mobility. High mobility playstyle, high mobility builds, because we don't really have anything to counter high mobility at the moment. And because of that, in certain cases, mobility is sort of too rewarding. And you don't really want to nerf mobility, because the people that enjoy that kind of playstyle might say, hey man, we like to play really mobile, we like to move around, we like to burst and run, that's how we like to play. And of course, if you mess with mobility, it's going to severely imbalance PvP, so the solution would be to offer a soft counter for that PvE wise. And of course they are effective against high mobility playstyle and builds, and they can be countered by engaging as soon as the stock debuff is active. So basically you have a choice. You try to outrun it, and you'll have to deal with it later, or you stay a little bit, you take your time, you find the stalker, and basically the prey becomes the hunter. As you can see, these mob classes that I thought about extensively bring out some really interesting playstyles that are actually already in the game, but you don't actually have the PvE to complement that playstyle. So that is something to really think about. Moving on, another mob class would be channelers. Lore wise, there could be any elemental, flame legions, or whatever. Special ability is the fact that they do continuous damage. Other abilities, they could have insane range plus AoE, and they should be like channeling but at a slower interval. You can have like mortar type mobs that can be countered by stealthing. Basically you stealth towards them, and once you reach them, since they attack at a really low interval, you can really burst them down. Or they can have extreme damage at a very short range and low mobility, or progressive extreme AoE damage and low mobility, basically around them, some sort of mob that you really don't want to get close to. So they would be effective versus melee, except the mortars of course, and they can be heavily countered by the fact that they would take extra damage from confusion. So basically another play style. You see a channeler type mob and you can attack him the old fashioned way, or you can prey on his weakness, you can prey on the fact that it takes extra damage from confusion. Depending on the amount of monsters and location in which these types of monsters would be implemented, you can really put confusion in a more favorable spot PvE wise without imbalancing it in PvP, because you actually didn't change anything to confusion. Basically you change how the confusion that is already in the game and is attuned for PvP interacts with the PvE system. Another mob class that I thought about would be, let's say, Dominators. Lore wise, they should be like Sons of Svani or dragons or some sort of huge creatures, demons, whatever. Special ability, they take reduced damage from range attacks. Of course we need to have a mob class that hunts classes at range, because otherwise everyone is going to play range if you're not careful, because you don't want to force everyone to play range. So we are not going to make that mistake. We have to give a little bit of balance while providing diversity. So under other abilities, they could have a blink attack, reduced condition duration, a pull, a knockdown, or a heavy attack. They would be effective versus range, and they can be countered by melee plus stability. These are just a few of the ideas that I have. I have a lot more ideas of interesting things that could be created and placed into the game, but that is for another time. Meanwhile, we are going to move on to number 1. The last suggestion that I would make, the last implementation that I would want to see in the game, it's actually more of a combination of all the suggestions that I said until now, that with a little more fine-tuning is meant to permanently fix the current issue in PvE and bring Guild Wars 2 at a whole nother level. So the number 1 thing that I want to see in the game is, I don't even know how to call it, is actually a fix to a really great problem that is plaguing PvE at the moment. It's more of a meta problem, that's what they even call it, meta. I'm ironically calling it the great meta. I even made a video about it, and for you to better understand the gravity of this issue, I'm going to link the video in the description or in an annotation somewhere around here. But this time I'm going to be quite objective about it. I even wrote it down. Basically something like fix behind the corner stacking in lost power builds only kills builds diversity. Yeah, something like that. So what do I mean by that? Well, according to the build system that was here from the beginning of the game, in my opinion at least, it seems that ArenaNet try to remove all the limitations of the Holy Trinity, keep all the good aspects about it, and add a lot more diversity, and all of this combined would yield something really spectacular, something far greater than what most MMOs that accept the Holy Trinity design could offer. So you already saw that they took some first steps by designing the mob classes in such a way that it further serves this initial goal, the manifesto that they published in the beginning. But there is much more to be done. There is a lingering issue. There is what some people would call playing optimal. At the moment, some of you might think that playing power build is the most optimal way of playing, and there's a big problem with that from 2 angles. First, while playing power build, you can further increase your effectiveness by abusing bad gameplay design and exploiting, which is bad, and I talked about in the previous video that I will link in the description or whatever. But there's an even greater issue, and I couldn't manage to express myself really well what this problem is the first time I made the video, so I made the graph to help me with this. So it's basically like this: when they said they are breaking away from the Holy Trinity, all of us thought about a lot more complexity, not a lot less complexity. And as you can see, they sort of delivered on the promise. The build system is there. But the problem is, if you don't balance different play styles, if you don't balance different metas, of course you can play whatever you want. But if you make a certain meta too rewarding, too effective, eventually people are going to play only one meta. And then you have to sort of decide between playing diversity and playing effectiveness. And when you have to decide between effectiveness and diversity, then you already have a fucked up game. That's a big problem. The thing is, like I said, I made this small chart, the reward system in Guild Wars 2. And we have, let's say, Meta 1, which are the skill bursters, Meta 2, unskilled bursters, Meta 3, another playstyle, Meta 4, another playstyle. If how rewarding a certain playstyle could be, let's say, placed as a value of 10 or 100, I'll just leave it at 10 because it's simpler to understand. We have 10, which is basically 100%. If a player manages to reach perfection in his desired playstyle, in his playstyle of choice, he will have a reward level of 10. Okay, so in Meta 1 we have skilled bursters that almost reach perfection, and they have maximum reward, basically maximum effectiveness. There's no way to get faster reward than this. That's what I'm saying. Basically, how much you get in how much time. Okay, we have the unskilled bursters, which the maximum reward is already really high, and even if they're really bad, they will still have a higher reward than players that play a different play style and play it perfectly. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say. The reward system in Guild Wars 2 was designed with individual loot, individual mining, and a lot of really good principles. So my biggest issue with the current reward system in Guild Wars 2 is that the great meta is rewarding by choice, not by skill. What do I mean by that? Well, you should be rewarded by the player's skill. And of course there should be optimal builds within a certain playstyle, within a certain meta. There shouldn't be an optimum meta. That's what I'm saying. That's a really, really big problem, because no matter how good a player that likes to play condition type builds, because he always played a condition type build before in every game he ever played, no matter how skilled that player is, his maximum reward level is still capped. And another player that could be really bad is actually getting more reward just because of the choice he made. And that choice might be in tune with what he likes to play, or maybe he doesn't like to play bursting type builds or meta 1 type builds, but he plays that because the meta is the most effective. That's a wrong principle. That's a faulty principle. No one can argue with that. And of course you will have hundreds of players saying that we play the way we want. We want to play optimal. We play power builds. We want to play power builds. Not so much. If in some miracle way condition builds become far stronger than power type builds, everyone will switch and they go, we play the way we want. We like to play condition builds. The fact is that the majority of players will be drawn to the most effective way of playing, and they will defend that play style because for a time they will have an advantage over the players that prefer to play a different playstyle, even if it's not as effective, just because that is what they enjoy to do. So it is my firm belief that Guild Wars 2 should approach a wider audience by offering what was promised in the beginning: equality between playstyle, and the amount of reward should be decided solely by the skill and effectiveness and optimum within the desired playstyle. And it should never be a choice, it should always be skill involved. So that is something that you cannot really argue with. Okay, I think I made my point with how things should be and why. Now comes the how part. You can't really buff condition type builds into infinity. Let me show you why. If you have 2000 condition damage, 25 stacks are still going to yield you a damage per second of 3575, not nearly enough to compete with power builds for single target DPS. We know that condition builds are meant to fight AoE. Most people are skipping, and we'll deal with skipping in a few seconds. We already dealt with it, but I'm going to make a point about condition damage. A lot of people say that they should remove the cap. Very well, they remove the cap. You can now stack an infinite number of conditions on the target. 5 players are not going to be able to stack more than 100 condition stacks on the target because there isn't enough condition duration in the game, and if you add more condition duration, it's going to imbalance PvP, World v World, everything is going to be crap. Even so, let's say you get even more than that, and you have 250 stacks of conditions. Even so, you only reach a DPS of 35,750, which is again not nearly enough to deal with the reflect damage and every other type of minor exploit. So you can't really bring conditions up a notch. You don't really want to nerf power type builds. You should deal with the reflects a little bit, like I said a few hundred times. This is the only game in the world in which you can reflect the boss's damage back to him so hard that he actually kills himself. There should be a cap to the amount of damage reflected. That really should be sorted out. So how do we actually fix this problem, which is so complicated, with minimum amount of effort, because you don't really want to recreate the entire PvE world at the moment, without nerfing the current metas, because people are going to yell if they saw they did 5000 damage once and the second day they only do 3000 damage. They're going to take it offensively. And even so, there's always going to be a new meta dominating, and people are just going to switch between metas. As long as there is one dominating meta, they will just take that, and that's a really big problem. And to create the next dominating meta, you might have really messed up the build system PvP wise, and there's a lot of complications there as well. As you can see, you can't really increase the condition damage, It just cannot be done. You can't really remove the bleeding stack cap. You could, but it doesn't solve the problem. So let's see now. No buffing to condition type builds, because as you can see, that doesn't really solve anything. No nerfing to power type builds, because then a lot of people are going to rage, and the people that would rage will most likely just look for the next best thing, and it still doesn't solve the problem. Don't redesign the entire PvE system, because that's not really an option at this point. The solution has to be simple, elegant, and not only solve the current issue, but solve it in such a way that you take control of the game, you take control of the metas, so that no other meta will ever get out of hand. As you can see, I already took the first steps with the mob classes, and now it kind of makes sense, because skipping can now be an official thing. You can actually skip, and there's a consequence for skipping, and it's your choice. If you wish to skip, you have to deal with the stalkers. If you don't wish to skip, you have to deal with something else, and the reward level kind of gets normalized. So of course you cannot really do a soft counter to a certain playstyle, a certain method of playing, without giving a reward. And of course the stalker should be included in a dynamic event which is randomized. Dynamic events are already in the game, so I'm free to use them. And they should reward a certain something that people want. At the moment I think it should be Dragonite ore. It's really hard to obtain, people are kind of upset about it. So if you give that as a reward for a soft counter to a broken playstyle, just to put it on par, just to bring it down a notch without actually nerfing it, allowing it to play and making it official with a reward on top. You see where I'm going with this? I didn't buff condition builds, I didn't nerf power builds, I didn't do anything of the sorts, and I didn't totally restructure the game. I just used the things that are already at my disposals. So this is my idea basically. It's really complicated. I hope I got through. It's actually an entire thought process. It's a mentality, it's a way of thinking. Whenever a meta gets out of hand, you compensate for that by creating something that adds like a soft cap, and at the same time it's really interesting. It's a fun new design, it's a fun new mechanic. There are new monsters and new rewards. No one is going to be the wiser here. At the same time, whenever a meta is falling behind, you envision and create monsters that in the same manner complement that certain playstyle, and you add a greater reward to it just to put it on par with everything. This way you normalize metas in such a way that it doesn't imbalance PvP, but more than that, the game is rewarding not based on the choice of meta, but merely by being optimum in your playstyle of choice, and the skill of the player is all that matters. So this is the thought process, and before I go, just a little bit more implementation, a little bit more help with the bosses. So for example, I'm going to take Lupicus. It's really rewarding to force him into a corner, stack on him and burst him down before he can even do anything. That is sort of a problem, because it's far too rewarding compared to any other playstyle, and it seems unfair. You are forced to play that way or fall behind. So this would be a good starting point to implement something in the game that has never been attempted before. You can't really have AI, and I don't mean AI, I mean AI, in an MMORPG. It would cost far too much if such a thing would even be possible. But you can have reactive AI. So for example, if you stay melee for a too longer period of time, the monster reacts to your playstyle and steps on you. If you stack at range, it does a range pulsing attack at that location, and players can't really stack at the location anytime soon because it is a pulsing type damage skill, and they have to regroup somewhere else. If the boss dies way too fast, then he can go invulnerable, summon some summoners, and as you can see, the possibilities are endless. The end goal should be, whatever playstyle you decide to opt, you should have almost the same result. Of course, you cannot go like 5 healers, because that's not really gonna help. Maybe in some dungeon paths that should be allowed. This is still a damage oriented game. It's an action oriented game, and damage should have a bit more value. Therefore, I believe that 5 healers shouldn't be as effective as 5 damage dealers, but at the same time they shouldn't be like obsolete. So by doing all of these implementations, I believe that Guild Wars 2 will finally solve the problems that it is facing. It will take control of the metas in such a way that no other meta will ever get out of hand, and I designed the solution in such a way that at the same time it will expand the game lore-wise and PvE-wise with mob diversity. We will have reactive AI for bosses, and just everything will put the game one step closer on the path of being the best MMORPG that has ever been made. So that is all I had to say. I'm tired now. There are of course a lot more things that I could say, but that is for another time, if suggestions will be needed in the future. I did my best to contribute to a fix to the problems that are in the game, because it's really easy to stay on the side and say, yeah, that is broken, this is bugged, blah blah blah. It's much harder to actually come up with a solution, and that is what I try to do. So you guys can let me know what you think about my suggestions. Put in the comment section below questions, suggestions of your own. Give me as much feedback as you want, and until next time, enjoy your gaming and have a great day.